The Coach Emo era has officially begun as Eric Morris and his family arrive inside the tight confines of Boone Pickens Stadium. They also did the introductory press conference, which started off with a bang. What a better way to ingratiate yourself with the fan base and fire up the entire state by saying, yeah, we need Bedlam back.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are we feeling, our Big 12 brethren? Shout out to the regulators and welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at All Day O State. Today, we're partially brought to you by Game Time Tickets. Download the Game Time app. Make sure you utilize the promo code Locked On College, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Get squared away with the best in the ticketing industry today, which is Game Time Tickets. Speaking of getting the best in the industry, from an offensive perspective, it is inarguable that Eric Morris is that guy, and that guy has now finally arrived in Stillwater, Oklahoma, to begin this new era of Cowboy football. Naturally, it's hard not to be excited when you look at the offensive innovation, creativity, and the long lineage of not only coaches, but players that have been associated with Eric Morris. This is an exciting time in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we're very honored that he's bringing his family along for the ride, and that's probably where we should start before we get to the Bedlam conversation and some of the other highlights from the press conference. Is he mentioned and got even a little bit emotional. He's a diehard, old school, tried and true farming dude, which is why Stillwater, America is an absolutely perfect fit. And he mentioned, is this a place where I can align my values to raise my family, so on and so forth, coming from a small town farm in West Texas? Absolutely, Stillwater, Oklahoma foots that bill, and this is precisely where he wants his kids to be raised. And I think that should alleviate a little bit of our concerns about him potentially utilizing Oklahoma State as a jump-off school. If he gets his kids squared away in the Stillwater school system and he's having the success that we all believe that he can have, it might be a significant ways down the line before he's even willing to shake up the family dynamic. Of course, a lot of things change in coaching, a lot of things happen, but unless Jerry Maguire magically leaves Lubbock, Texas in the next handful of years, I don't see this as a viable concern. And the closer he gets with the fan base, the better he's going to be. And we're going to talk about some of the things he talked about in terms of the fan base in a minute, but the family dynamic is important. He did get a little bit emotional because his wife, Maggie, it takes a different type of individual to stand behind this level of inconsistency, because in the coaching world, sometimes your moves aren't always predicated upon your success. Sometimes your moves have political narratives kind of built into them, and you can't always control what your next stop is going to be, especially if you're a coordinator. And as we just witnessed after 2+ decades of Mike Gundy, if things go off the rocker and completely sidelined, we're going to have to make some moves. So shout out to his wife, Maggie, for being a consummate professional in the wifing industry, for him to get this opportunity, because it does take that level of stability for you to build what you want to build, especially if it's going to be, cornerstoned around grit, toughness, intensity, work ethic, and just holding yourself to the highest standards of accountability. He also brought Jack and George, his two sons, with him. They're going to love the Stillwater, Oklahoma schooling system, likely, which means we get more opportunities to keep Eric Morris. And then the big bang was, I want to bring Bedlam back. And he said to anybody out in the OU country, if there's any questioning on whether Coach Eric Morris wants Bedlam to reside inside Stillwater, Oklahoma once again, it is Eric Morris. And that is precisely what we need. I mean, you could admit the fact that we're going to talk a little bit more in the third segment about this, but there's a component to OU getting screwed. Perhaps that could be another jab at the Big 12, but we need this back in the state of Oklahoma. It's good for the state. It's good for recruiting. It's good for building viability later on in the scheduling. In the Big 12 specifically, no matter who we play in the offseason, it's not always going to be measured to the same degree as the offseason that the SEC plays. However, if you can have a marquee matchup game that is an SEC opponent, there's no way that they can hold that against you at the end of the season. So that way you could potentially find yourself in a scenario that doesn't include what just happened with BYU. The offensive creativity and innovation that he's been a part of is another thing that he kind of alluded to. His connection with learning how to do things from Mike Leach, learning how to evaluate quarterbacks, and then working with guys like Lincoln Riley and Coach Bro, Cliff Kingsbury, and then him arriving at Incarnate Word and realizing he knew how to evaluate quarterbacks. He knew how to conduct an air raid, high-flying passing attack, but yet they were leading the country in so many offensive categories at Texas Tech, but it wasn't equaling into the wins and losses department that'll give you the opportunity to win Big 12 titles. Tech, congratulations getting your first Big 12 title, but he knew that I had to find a way to get the running game going a little bit more at Incarnate Word, and that is precisely why he's bringing a lot of those old school OGs, if you will, on his coaching staff that dated back to that Incarnate Word beginning system to now at Oklahoma State. So it does appear as though the offensive creativity of guys like Jordan Davis should be coming over. Coach Brophy, coaching quarterback, should be coming over. We should see Greg Richmond on the sidelines in orange and black once again, the defensive line coach for the Mean Green. If he's coming over with Skylar Cassidy, and yes, you saw in the thumbnail, I did put Braden Cassidy and Brendan Presley in the Bedlam thumbnail because that family aspect has to be important to Eric Morris. And there's not a better place in the country, in my personal opinion, than to get that connectivity with the fan base, with the town, with the former players than in Stillwater. That's another thing. The former players, that was the biggest reason that I was excited about Zach Robinson, was he was very open with bringing the Des Bryants and the Russell Okungs and the Kennel Hunters of the world back into the fold at Oklahoma State to make the alumni out there recruiting on behalf of the Cowboys, which we unfortunately have not seen very much of in the last 2 decades. There's a different recruiting philosophy there, more has compared to Mike Gundy. Of course, you're bringing in the GM Raj Murdy. If he does, in fact, bring the Jordan Davises and the Coach Brophies and the Coach Cassidys and Richmonds of the world, coupled with the talent that we already have on this roster, we could instantaneously see ourselves as competitive once again in that 500 ballpark in year one. It perhaps is worth the price of admission for everybody at Oklahoma State country. The fans showed up all season. Regardless of what the product was on the football field, we were still managing to put 40, 50 plus thousand people in the stands. That no doubt swayed Eric Morris in his decision-making to some degree. Chad Weiberg absolutely nailed this one. We had our coach before Auburn, right? Before Arkansas. I know LSU and Penn State are a little bit different, but I could say that the Penn State saga is not as big as the Oklahoma State saga. Coach Eric Morris chose Oklahoma State over the Arkansas of the world, the Penn States of the world. And I think that proves exactly what he's going to bring to Oklahoma State. It's going to be fairly instantaneous. The cohesiveness of the staff, the current roster at North Texas, the current roster at Oklahoma State, if we can merge this thing together, it's going to be a deadly combination. Not even to mention the fact he's already talked about the transfer portal, and it does appear as though they're going to be more of a sniper in the portal because they've proven that they can evaluate talent to a completely different level. Or we talked about the coaching connections, learning from Mike Leach and Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley. But we didn't even talk enough about the connections he have with Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, Cam Moore, John Mateer, Drew Mestemaker, the whole 9 yards. And I have some people seen online say that if you look at John Mateer, him going to play SEC ball did not work out for him because it's a different animal than what was at Washington State. The difference there between John Mateer and his development compared to Drew Mestemaker is Jeff Christensen. Jeff Christensen is the private coach that worked with the Baker Mayfields and the Patrick Mahomes and the Kirk Cousins and the Michael Penixes of the world to get them at a completely different level. That's where I do see that there's a discrepancy between what John Mateer went through at OU and potentially what Drew Mestemaker could go through at Oklahoma State if he comes here. He's going to be difficult to get. So is Wendell Gregory. But at the same point in time, if the rumors are at all true that there's a bunch of donors that have been wanting to back more of Oklahoma State in the rev share era, but were reluctant because of some of the instability they felt from Mike Gundy, his staff, and him getting to the meetings with the donors and trying to uptick the financial gains department in Stillwater, Oklahoma, it does appear as though all of that is changing. Just like it appears as though that there's going to be a lot of changes in the coaching staff. We talked about the other day that it seemed like a lot of the coaches got their walking papers, which is very, very true. But there may be a few more coaches that may be viable candidates to be on the new staff that will likely get that determination within the next day or so. So it's not all of the staff being gone, and it's more than just a couple dudes that are going to have the opportunity to stick around. So let's talk about that here after the turn. We gotta remind the fine folks that it is, in fact, the season for you to get the best tickets in the industry. That's right. Game Time is the bee's knees for all of your ticketing needs. And right now, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be a massive event. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the most difficult part. That's why Game Time is so clutch. It finally gives fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track your price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open up, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back into your hands, and it makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. It's simplistic. You pull up the app. The layout makes it so simple. You scroll through the matchups and compare seat views, pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. There's no confusion, no hunting, no fine print. The seat view feature is a game changer, so you know precisely where you're sitting and what you're getting from a view perspective before you get there. Prices include fees up front, which you're going to absolutely love. No last-second surprises at checkout. Alerts for teams and matchups that make it easy to grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out on the next big event. So take the guesswork out of you buying tickets, World Cup tickets, concerts, music, theater, comedy, doesn't matter. Game Time has you covered. So make sure that you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, download the app, create an account, use a code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. It's easy. You swipe, tap, ticket, and go to download Game Time tickets today. From game time to shine time, Clint Bowen did give this defense enough opportunities to shine from a film perspective, whether they want to stay at Oklahoma State or they want to end up elsewhere. Because of Clint Bowen, a lot of these dudes are going to have the opportunity to do that. We talked about Wendell Gregory being a very difficult individual to hang on to. I have heard that Alabama is already heavily interested in Wendell Gregory. So we've got a lot to battle through from an adversity standpoint to keep this current roster together. But at the same point in time, it's because of coaches like Clint Bowen that we got to see that front seven excel to the degree that they did. Likewise, the only other group that really excelled a crazy amount visibly was the offensive line. It does appear as though Coach Cooper Bassett and perhaps maybe Coach Andrew Mitchell is going to have the opportunity to get a chance to stick around, at least in some capacity, alongside Coach Bowen. There's a connection with Coach Fatah that goes way back for Eric Morris, so that would be a natural selection. There could be a conversation had for Ryan McNamara, who was a linebacker coach that was assisting Cap Dede. I think Jules Montanar could be an individual that at least gets another sit-down meeting. There was a decent number of these guys that were at the press conference today that seemingly would like a chance to interview to stay around in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Coach Bowen seemed like a shoo-in. Doug Meacham was another name that we haven't heard that has exactly gotten the walk-in papers yet. So could we see Coach Meacham taking over the inside receivers once again, wide receivers in general once again? That's a possibility. Retaining Cooper Bassett to have that old-school Cowboy connection with the current roster, with old-school alumnus that maybe we haven't talked about enough. That was another highlight. Again, bringing back all the alumni stuff is so why I wanted Zach Robinson. But it sounds like Eric Morris is going to be able to do that. Who better to do that? If you can bring Greg Richmond over, that's a natural slide in. If you can keep Cooper Bassett on board, if you can keep Doug Meacham on board, Clint Bowen, that adds another layer of what we could potentially see stick around from this current roster. I think all of us would agree when you watched North Texas play, Drew Mestamaker is a bad mamma jamma, but as is Caleb Hawkins. How we all let this 6'2", 205, 210-pound running back get out of Shawnee, Oklahoma, I don't know, but we have an opportunity to rectify the situation. And if you combine him with Rodney Fields, if you combine that with Katie Batman Jones, that is an arsenal in the backfield that a lot of defenses are not going to be 100% prepared for. There's a reason Katie Batman Jones just broke a lot of the, if not all of the Jinx Trojan rushing records. And this is a Jinx Trojan squad that has, I don't know, in their history, probably 100 plus Division I standouts that have come from that place. So to have that guy come back into the fold, to me, it accentuates what Eric Morris said in locking down the state. Of course, almost every coach, when they get a job, says, first and foremost, we regionally, geographically, we got to lock this place down. We got to be the school. Well, he knows that Oklahoma State has won 2 of the last 3 from Bedlam, and he knows that before Mike Gundy got fired, we were decimating OU in the in-state recruiting portion. And he was able to come in and immediately retain the services, Braden Presley, get Katie Batman Jones back into the fold. And if you look at this next class of recruits at Oklahoma State or in Oklahoma, it's clear that there's an emphasis that is going to be put on getting these in-state guys here because we have plenty of talent. And on the flip side of it, what are these coaches going to be able to do to keep this roster together? I think that's the biggest importance here. If you get rid of Coach Bowen and Coach Bassett and Coach Meacham and Coach McNamara and Coach Montanar, there's going to be probably a very difficult opportunity ahead of the new coaching staff to keep the current players, right? You're going to have guys like Jaleel Johnson and Deshaun Brown that are likely extremely intrigued by the prospect of Greg Richmond coming back home because Greg Richmond had a hand in recruiting those dudes. But at the same point in time, if you don't have a Coach Greg Richmond at your disposal, do you look to a Ryan Osborne? Ryan Osborne is going to have tons of opportunities. We talked about, Coach Clint Bowen being one of those few dudes alongside Cooper Bassett that had a developmental position group that excelled as the season progressed. Ryan Osborne is in that category as well. So it'll be interesting. But it's nice to hear that it wasn't quite the mass exodus that was kind of being put out a couple days ago. Instead of just 2 or 3 coaches that are allowed to stick around and have interviews, it does appear as though there's probably maybe 6, 7, and if you get into the analysts that could jump up a little bit more, which I think is a brilliant move, and I think it ties into wanting to bring the alumnus back to Stillwater, Oklahoma. So if I'm Coach Eric Morris, all right, I would be reaching out to the Des Bryants and the Rashawn Woods and the Bobby Reeds and the Jeremy Smiths and the Russell Okungs of the world to not only see what they're doing, but see if they can help bridge that gap between Oklahoma State now and what has been previously with some of the alumnus that have been legendary pieces at Oklahoma State. That's going to be huge for recruiting. And I think that's part of the calculated piece here for Eric Morris is if I can get the Des Bryants and the Kendall Hunters and the Tylen Wallaces of the world out here visibly trying to get guys to Oklahoma State, that's going to make my job so much easier. It's going to allow Raj Murdy to stress a little bit less as well about being out on the recruiting trail and trying to identify the proper talent. This is where we should be excited, though, is the identification of talent. So if Eric Morris and Coach Brophy and Coach Jordan Davis, if they come in and they watch film and they say, you know what, this Zane Flores kid, he can be so much better. If you gave him this weapon or you gave him the ability to decipher information this way, if they say that Zane Flores should stick around, we need to be excited about that. Likewise, if they come in and say, you know what, Coach Cooper Bassett, Coach Clint Bowen, Coach Doug Meacham, Coach McNamara, Osborne, Montaner, whatever the case is, if they say, you know what, we've gone through it, we understand that you provide not only value to the current roster, the upcoming recruiting classes, but you have film proof that you're a necessity in the rebuild of Oklahoma State. So whatever coaches do get the opportunity to extend their time in Stillwater, Oklahoma, I think we need to be insanely excited because that means they went through the vetting process of Coach Morris, Raj Murdy, Coach Davis, Coach Cassidy, Coach Richmond, all of the above. They've gone through the vetting process, and there's a clear emphasis on having some of those old school tie-ins. So the names that we do here that got the opportunity to stick around, we have to be over the moon excited about that because that means that's coming from Eric Morris, Raj Murdy, and the rest of their staff. Not to mention Greg Richmond does have a connection, so he's going to know at least something about a lot of these guys. And he's going to have connections to be able to make phone calls to differentiate which individuals can provide a big spark in Stillwater, which individuals were not quite doing enough, who are the best fundamental technicians, so on and so forth. So both players and returning staff, if this new Oklahoma State, Eric Morse and Raj Murray-led staff, if they dictate that this guy should stay, this guy should go, this guy should stay, we're not going to pay that amount, so on and so forth, we just have to have faith in it. Just like we had faith in Chad Weiberg getting this done, because Chad Weiberg gave us David Taylor at wrestling, J.C. Hoyt, who's 10-1 in basketball, Steve Lutz, who's 9-0 undefeated in basketball. Chad Weiberg made this decision, and he made it early. We got our guy before almost everybody else, and we know that our guy turned down a lot of other opportunities because of Stillwater. And lastly, the championships. That's what he talked about in the press conference. Can I raise my family here? Does this align with my values? And can I win championships here? We know we can win Big 12 titles here because we do have one under Mike Gundy, but he also played for like 7 more, whether they be pseudo for the opportunity to play in the Big 12 title, or remember there was a couple years where there was differentiation between a one true champion and not. And even in those years, Bedlam equaled the Big 12 champion. So if we would have won a couple of those Bedlams, we'd have 3, 4, possibly more Big 12 titles. So it can be done. And I appreciate the fact that Eric Morse is coming here too to do just that. But I think he's talking above Big 12 titles. I think he's saying we have a shot at the national title. And for anybody out here that's not an Oklahoma State fan, all you have to do is go back and look at 2011. Oklahoma State should have played for a national title in 2011, and you can't convince us of otherwise, because the BCS knew that they flawed the system to get Alabama in by 0.008%. So the BCS had to go. Now, is the CFP much better? Not really. Okay, but Oklahoma State getting screwed royally is why the CFP died. And there is a lot of evidentiary proof that say that that is precisely what happened. If Oklahoma State had not gotten screwed, the BCSA might still be alive, but we would have played for a national championship in 2011. We had talented rosters since then that were good enough to compete for that. I always go back to 2021, the best or second best defense in Oklahoma State history compared to maybe 1984. We didn't even try offensively. And right, Mike Gundy and Casey Dunn would almost joke about how we only need a touchdown and a field goal because of our defense, which is true, and that is great, and that's a huge badge of honor for the defense, and they did feel that way. But if we had any willingness or desire to have an offensive attack, what could 2021 have looked like? We had the number 2 defense in the United States of America. But we basically shoved them in a corner because of our unwillingness to do things offensively. That's not going to be a question under Eric Morris. Now, defensively, North Texas had some holes, and Incarnate Word potentially even had some holes. So there's going to be some things that need to be cleaned up. But again, that's why I think it's important to keep the coach Clint Bowens, to keep the coach Ryan McNamara's or Jules Montanars or Cooper Bassett's, because it does a lot to make things easier for Coach Emo, a.k.a. Eric Morris. It is the gift-giving season, and the best gift on the market is probably Omaha Steaks. Feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love, it's pretty difficult. And when you can do both in one move, you got to knock it out of the park. Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your front door. Because their sizzle all the way sale right now, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And it even gets better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with coupon or code college at checkout. You're going to love Omaha Steaks because of the variety, and the reaction that you're going to get from your family is always going to be, this is the best gift ever. You're going to love how easy it is to gift. Shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook in an ice chest. The steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It's restaurant-level meals at home all the time. So many options: fillets, burgers, comfort meal size, desserts. You can build a box for anybody. Holiday magic makes it easy if you have the right gift, which is Omaha Steaks. Make sure that you order by 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it ships in the same day. Save big on gourmet gifts and make holiday favorites the best with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an additional $35 off, use a promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. Make sure that you go see Omaha Steaks site for details. That is omahasteaks.com. Make sure you use that code COLLEGE so you can get the best gift in the world for your loved ones or yourself this gift-giving season. Last but not least, yes, the Big 12 not only did to some degree get screwed, still, if you compare BYU's metrics to that of Miami or Texas or Notre Dame or Vanderbilt, it's not even really comparable. And yes, I do think that they did get screwed. We all know that it was designed from the get-go for them to likely get screwed. I don't think that it was coincidence that they kept strategically getting placed number 11. Which means just barely in if all things go well, but it gives you a easy justification for kicking them out if something doesn't go well. Unfortunately, the Big 12 title game did not go well for them. Yet there is some sentiment that if they'd have lost by 7, 8, 10, that maybe they would have squeezed into the playoffs. I don't think so. I think that all Texas Tech had to do was win, and that was going to be more than enough for the committee to justify not getting them in. Now, you got to give a little bit of respect to the committee for putting Miami in over Notre Dame because the head-to-head thing did matter. Notre Dame sitting at home on championship weekend while everybody else that was vying for an opportunity to go to the playoffs was battling through adversity, injuries, etc. And so that's the position we find ourselves in. And honestly, let's be real, OU got screwed in this ordeal too. Like if you compare what OU did, we talk about the head-to-head matchup thing being an important component, which is why Miami got in over Notre Dame. OU beat Alabama. OU took care of business, I would say, more often than not than even a Texas, other than the Red River, which is maybe what cancels them out. I still can't find a justification really for keeping OU out, just like I can't find a justification for keeping BYU out other than they have some things going against them. Them being a religious institution is, I think, weighed heavily. It shouldn't be, but that's why they never got in the Pac-12 as well. That's why they never were attached to Utah, because of the negative connotations that come with some religious institutions. Thankfully, the Big 12 is bigger than that, better than that, and we went above that ridiculousness to get them in the conference. If they would have played Texas Tech more competitively, perhaps they squeeze in, but I doubt it. And as much as I would love to see North Texas beat Tulane and have North Texas representing essentially Oklahoma State in the playoffs for future recruiting, etc., Tulane's front seven, offensive line and defensive line, definitely proved that they're a little bit more competitive up front than somebody like a North Texas. And same is going to be said about JMU. I love getting at least one G5 into every single year, but 2 G5s, I mean, that's a bit much. I just wish the committee would be more consistent. They don't seem to know what they're doing or what they want to do. And so here we sit, and at least they're better than Notre Dame for opting out of the bowl game. So did Kansas State and Iowa State, which is super, super Charmin, weak sauce move. But at least they have some semblance of an excuse, right? We're losing our coaches, therefore we might be losing half our rosters. Therefore, it's not fair to us or our opponent that we're going to potentially field half of a roster to play in a bowl game. I kind of get that, but at the same point in time, you got a bunch of dudes that fought through spring, that fought through fall, that fought through adversity, that stayed second, third, four-string scout team on the depth chart all year. They have been chomping at the bit to get one opportunity, and I feel like you're robbing those dudes of that by opting out of a bowl game. So I'm proud of Brett Yormark and the Big 12 for suing them for $500,000, something to that effect. That should happen, because in this world where we demonize players for leaving, but we publicize coaches for leaving, Thankfully, Eric Morris did it the right way and was willing to see his North Texas team all the way through to the very, very end. And yes, North Texas fans, you could take a little bit of solace in the fact that in his press conference, he admitted being 100% committed to 2 different jobs was very difficult. Trying to game plan while also put together a recruiting class in 4 days for Oklahoma State, was not easy on him. Thankfully, he was honest about that, right? A lot of coaches, 99% of coaches, probably would have gave us the coach speak answer of, oh, it didn't affect me at all. I could easily prepare my team for the American Conference title game and also recruit for Oklahoma State. At least he's realistic about it. At least he's honest about it. It's a breath of fresh air in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And lastly, before we do get off of here, I know we kind of ran out of time, but he seems to be alluding to the fact that they're going to be very, very, very selective in the transfer portal. They're going to try to bring likely a bunch of the North Texas guys with them. They're likely going to try to keep probably, I guess, 35-ish% of the current Oklahoma State roster. And then the last 10, 15, 20-ish%, they're going to round out with the transfer portal. The identification of talent is why we all have to be welcoming, excited, and comfortable with whatever they look at in the transfer portal, because it'll be the exact opposite of what we just witnessed. You can have NIL money, but if you spend it entirely on the wrong dudes, then you just wasted the donors' dollar bills, which might be why they would typically be more reluctant to get involved the next go around. We're not going to have to be concerned about all that. The talent evaluation with Eric Morris and some of the staff that he's bringing with him, likely that have gone back to Incarnate Word, to North Texas, to now, if they have identified, it'd be the same as the coaches. If they identify Coach Bowen and Bassett and Montanar and McNamara and whoever else absolutely has to stay put, and they need to try to convince X, Y, or Z number of players to also stay put, then whatever they decide in the transfer portal is likely to look precisely or significantly light years different than this current season that we just went through. We spent the money. We just spent it on the wrong dudes. We now have a staff that clearly can identify what they need, that clearly is great at building relationships, that evidently is the best in the country, or one of the best in the country, at unearthing the talents that nobody else sees, right? Look at Cam Ward. He ran like a triple option style offense. So nobody really was giving him offers because nobody had really ever seen him throw the football. But Eric Morris, he went beyond that. He went outside of what is normal to unearth the talent. And it's like he said, don't get mad at me if I sign a 3-star quarterback. Because he didn't say this, but what he meant, I'd assume, is I'm the dude that helped with the Bakers and the Mahomes and the Mateers and the Wards and the Messmakers and the Chandler Morses. I'm that guy. So if I go get a 2-star, 3-star, 0-star, can we at least see that we can breathe kind of easy? And that probably is an extension of his staff. If Eric Morris is next level already at identification of talent that everybody else in the country isn't even looking at, I would assume that's one of the biggest things he's looking at in his staff. I need guys who can identify talent the way that I do, that can sift through the film and look at 7-on-7, and look at combines, and look on one-on-one events instead of just their statistics or their film from high school. He is that guy. So if we go get transfers out of Emporia State or Valdosta State or Friends University, we should be insanely excited instead of the automatic knee-jerk reaction, which is, well, why would we go get a guy from, Valdosta State as an example? Why would we do that? Well, it's because Eric Morris and his staff are already at a completely different level when it comes to assessing talent. Anywho, what an exciting time. And if we can bring Bedlam back, yes, absolutely. We need that. We want that. That'll help with in-state recruiting. And that's probably something that he's looking at. We've won 2 of the last 3 in Bedlam. They just got screwed by being left out of the playoffs. They're having contentious relationships with teams like Nebraska that are running scared, that do not want to play them. Coach Eric Morris does. And that in and of itself should be the biggest reason why we're excited. He's an old school, farming, blue collar, work ethic, get up at 4, grind till midnight kind of guy. And that's what we needed. That's the exact same thing that I believe Mike Gundy was for the most part in the beginning of his career as the head man in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one at Right Here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. My podcast and people out there, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter. You're everything that makes this work. I greatly appreciate what you do. So do me a favor, go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some more reviews. All right, y'all. Later, taters.